Genesis chapter 42 this evening as we continue to go through the life of Joseph. Joseph has now been elevated to second in command of all of Egypt. Now, time flies quickly in the scriptures oftentimes, from one chapter to the next chapter, from even one verse to the next verse. If you remember, just a few chapters ago, Joseph was a 17-year-old young man, favored by his father. Was told by his dad, hey, go check up on your brothers as they're doing, taking care of the flock or the flocks and stuff. And it was quite a trek from Hebron all the way up to Shechem that he would be going by himself. But, the 17-year-old makes this way, and he's wearing his coat of many colors that his dad had given to him. But again, not that long ago, he was 17 years old. And yet he was sold into slavery by his brothers. And so much happens in this whole time frame from the time that he is 17 years old to the time that we have here, because, again, all these things are going on in his life, and one has to wonder, if you've been following along, one has to wonder, how can God use any of this in anybody's life? Because not too many things have been going his way, it seems like. But being sold into slavery was one thing. Being sold into slavery and then taken to a place where he was bought as a slave, a servant. He begins to run this official's household, the guy who basically purchased him and bought him. And so he's helping him out there for a while, or doing the work there for a while with this official. And then he is accused of rape by his master's wife. And then he's put into prison. And then we turn around, and now he's running the prison in no time flat. He's used by God while he is in prison, forever how long he had been up until that point. He is used by God to help some of the inmates who had been troubled with couple of dreams that each of them had, and he ministers to them, and the one that's going to get out, he says, hey, don't forget me when you're in front of Pharaoh, because Pharaoh can get me out of here. And we learned that he was forgotten for 2 years. And so you're going, how could any good happen when things like this keep on happening in somebody's life? Because again, I think a lot of us have lived long enough that things, sometimes it just falls apart. Things are falling apart. And then once you feel like, okay, I got my head above water, you go down another time. And you're going, Lord, I don't get it. And so you can imagine this 17-year-old having to go through all these things. And from that time to where we're at basically today, 13 years have passed. And now this 17-year-old is 30 years old when he is brought into a position that we found ourselves last week. And he has spent most of his young productive life going through a lot of trouble. But I will tell you this, that it was in those times, in those young productive lives or years that he had, that God was building in him something, preparing him for what he had, and that is character. You can't even imagine, even back then, 17-year-olds were probably like 45-year-olds nowadays, but again, it's like God was doing something in him. Just like he's doing in us when we don't quite get it. Why am I going through this? Why? And I think that God doesn't have to give us the answer as to why, but if he did, we wouldn't believe it, of what he would be doing in our lives. And so there was a lot of lessons that were learned, lesson after lesson, on how to trust God through this time. And I think what he also learned being in that place in Egypt, being bought by Potiphar, an official, being put in prison and then running the prison, I think what he learned a lot as well was the culture that he found himself in. And God would use that in a powerful way, because without realizing that God was preparing him to be used in one of the most powerful ways in history to save his nation. Not just to save the Egyptians and many more lives, but to change or to save his family. And as fast as things move sometimes in the scriptures and in our lives, at the beginning of our last chapter, Joseph was still in prison, and by the end of that chapter, Joseph found himself being second in command of all Egypt. Things happen quickly, and sometimes God is preparing us, and then he gets us to a certain point, and then all of a sudden the ball starts rolling, and then you're going, oh, I get it, Lord. I had to go through all the hard times because of what you have in store for me here. And I'm not saying, oh, now it's all going to be hunky-dory. Everything is great. The responsibility sometimes is greater that you would not have been able to handle it back here had this happened back here. And now that this is happening, now God's going, here, you've been faithful through all this time. Now I got to give you all this stuff. But now I've prepared you to do that. And so what we found in that chapter, from one chapter, man, time flew. Because not only did he go from being in prison to being second in command, but he also got married. And he has 2 kids. Oh my goodness, man. And by the time we finish in chapter 30 or 41, this young man is about 39 years old. Joseph is about 39 years old at this time. And he has a lot more responsibility than he could have ever imagined. So, chapter 42, let's read the first 5 verses. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at each other?" And he said, "Indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in all the land of Canaan. Now, I know that oftentimes I share with you what other translations, how they word things and stuff. My favorite being the Amplified. But I also use the New Living Translation to read how other things might be said, a certain passage, a certain verse. But the beginning here, when it says, when Jacob saw, the translation I'm going to give you is none of those. It's my own little translation. That it could have better started off by saying something like, meanwhile, back at the ranch, Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt. Because again, for the last couple of chapters, we haven't heard anything. But now we're going back to the ranch. Now what's going on over in Canaan? What is happening over there? As I thought about this whole thing, again, they've heard certain things about what's going on in Egypt. They have no clue who is in charge of any of that. I don't know if they understand or they have heard it through the grapevine, through the roads, however they might hear things, that there's a guy over there who is now running all of this thing that has prophesied that there will be these 7 years of plenty, and then there will be a 7-year famine. I don't know if they've caught all that news. I can imagine that in Egypt, they've heard all of those things already. To get to that point, I don't know, but But we do know what's happened over in Canaan is that the famine has hit them. Throughout that whole Middle East area. It wasn't just Egypt that was going through it. After that promised 7 years of plenty that came through, and again, it's so interesting because when he says this is what the dream is all about, immediately Pharaoh knew we got to get on this and we got to get on this quick. We can't wait 4 more years and then start saving. We have to start saving now. And so he starts taxing the people at Joseph's encouragement to start taxing the people 20% of everything. Again, they were probably used to paying 10%, but they're doubling the taxes. But the people really don't mind because they are just bringing in money hand over fist. So they're going 20%, no problem, man. We'll take care of that. But it wasn't just in Egypt, it was in the surrounding areas. So Joseph is all over the place, setting all these things in place during those 7 years of plenty. And just like the Lord showed him, as soon as those 7 years of plenty were done, this famine starts. And it would be so severe, and the dreams kind of told about it, that once the severity of this famine hit, it would be like they never even had 7 good years, except for Joseph. Except for Joseph, he's already stored up enough for all the people in Egypt, but not only for the people of Egypt, because they know that there's going to be other people coming. And so he has stored up enough to take care of just that whole region of the Middle East, because people are coming from all over the place. There would be enough grain for the people, not to overdo it, but enough to keep them alive. And as we touched on last week, the Egyptians were already lining up, because at the end of our chapter last week, the 7 years of plenty were already done, and the famine had already hit. And so the Egyptians, they hadn't saved for themselves. They were waiting for the government to take care of that, and they did. But they're already starting to line up. And right at the end it says, and all the countries came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe in all the lands. And so other people are now starting to line up. What is interesting is that God had sent Joseph ahead to preserve his family, so that one day the nation of Israel could give us, or give the world, Jesus Christ, the Messiah. He prepared it. It tells us in Psalms 105, beginning in verse 16 to 21, it says, moreover, he called for a famine in the land. He destroyed all the provision of bread, speaking of God. He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They hurt his feet with fetters. He was laid in irons until the time that his word came to pass. The word of the Lord tested him. The king sent and released him. The ruler of the people let him go free. Verse 21, he made him lord of his house and ruler of all his provisions. It was the Lord that has prepared this. I think so often we think when bad things are happening throughout the world, we kind of like, well, it's Mother Nature, or it's this, or it's that. Who's to say that the Lord is not the one that's allowing these things to happen? And when we are going through issues in our lives and we're going, oh my gosh, it's the enemy, he's just attacking. And I don't doubt that. But I would say sometimes it's the Lord that has prepared that for you. Not so much the enemy. He might use the enemy for that, just like he used the enemy to put Israel in check when they needed to. But there's times that things go on in our lives and we're blaming everybody else, and God's going, whoa, 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 buckaroo, I'm the one that sent this. Just like he did, he showed us here in Psalms, that the Lord was the one that called for this famine. All of this was already set in place. He had to get the people out of Canaan and get them into Israel or into Egypt, because he knew if they stay in Canaan, they're going to destroy themselves. I have to put them in slavery over here, because the Egyptians are not going to want to intermarry with any of these people because they're too good for them. So he had to protect them and get them out of Canaan for a time, because they were a small people, but when they leave, they will be a nation eventually. And they needed that place, that protection under Egypt, so that God could use them to grow. And so needless to say, things are getting bad for the family of Jacob. And when I say the family, it's Jacob, his remaining wives, because we know Rachel's already passed away, his sons, and his sons, besides Benjamin and Joseph, but his sons, they're anywhere from about 39 years old to about 49 years old at this time. Time has passed. Benjamin is probably about 23 years old at this time. So he has their wives, their sons, their families, and not only their families, but their servants. They have a lot of stuff. They're a rich people. And not only the people, but their livestock. So it's beginning to hurt them. And I was thinking about this, and I was telling a young man today that I was talking to. It's interesting when you're poor, when you don't have a lot. You could do without. And if work stops for a few weeks, it's like, well, we'll make do. But if you're rich and you have a lot and you have to bring in a lot and a famine hits your little house, man, oh man, there's a lot of mouths to feed. There's a lot of things to take care of. I got those toys. I got these things. I got those things. So Jacob, again, this famine is not just him and his little wives there. There's some people. I mean, his family alone, as we will find out, are about 70 people, but that's not counting all his servants and his livestock. So let's just say there's, 150 people he has to take care of. How do you do that? Man, a famine starts hitting it, and you're going to start feeling it pretty quick. And so it's kind of understandable that when it says that he saw that there was a famine or that there was grain in Egypt, that he looks around at his sons. And if Jacob saw this and knew this about what was going on in Egypt, his kids have got to know this as well. They're not little kids. They have their own families. And their livestock and their servants and all of this reason. But for some reason, none of the boys want to bring this up to their dad. Hey, Dad, we're starting to scrimp here, and we need to do something. Nobody says anything. Maybe they were waiting for Jacob because he is the head of the family there, but all these guys are grown men. And they all saw the famine that was starting to take its toll. And so they all knew also about the grain. And it's funny because he says, why do you look at each other? I don't know if you had a dad like I had a dad that wouldn't use like language like this. He would use other colorful language to tell you, are you just going to sit there or stand there, blah, 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 you know? It's like you could understand the frustration. You guys are grown men. And you guys are just standing around looking at each other? What's up with that? And so you almost hear this frustration, as at least the way I read it, in Jacob's voice. Perhaps they were having a family meeting about the situation at hand, what was going on, and they're just kind of looking at each other like, and maybe they were just waiting for Dad to call shots. I don't know. But if he knew that there was grain in Egypt, then certainly they knew as well. And he asked the question. It's interesting because it almost looks like Jacob noticed this strange expression on the boy's face. And perhaps whenever the country of Egypt, or the region of Egypt, was mentioned, I wonder if it triggered something in these boys. Because could it be, is it possible that whenever they did hear of Egypt, they knew that more than likely, they had a little brother somewhere out there that they had sold into slavery. And maybe perhaps that's why they didn't want to speak up. They knew where the grain was at, but going, we don't want to go over there. Did they expect them to be alive? I don't know. But they knew who they sold them to people that were traveling, going on their way down to Egypt. And so is it possible that any time that Egypt was mentioned, that something triggered their conscience of what they had done and made them feel terrible? And without saying a word, they all look at each other because they knew. Maybe there was a sense of shame or something. And so you could imagine when their dad says, hey, I need you guys to go down there. That's the command. You need to go. Which from Hebron, going down to Egypt proper, basically, it's somewhere about 250 miles to 300 miles. So that would take at least 12 to 15 days, and they're all men that are going, so they can hold it a little longer. They can travel a little further. They can do a lot more. So they might be able to get there maybe in 10, 12 days instead of 12, 15 days. And that's just one way. So if they're going to go and they're going to book it over there, but it's going to be at least a month's journey to go down there, get what they need, and then have to bring all the animals full of their stuff back. So they're loaded going the other way. And normally, again, it would be a long and dangerous journey. But all the brothers are together here, and they're going to probably protect one another. But there's probably also a lot of traffic going in that direction. Just like we would see people on the 15 going to Vegas on a weekend, 4-day weekend, you just see the lights, man, all the way over there, and you're going, man, that's a lot of traffic. Because it tells us in verse 5 that, again, that they would buy grain among those who journeyed down there. So there was people going in that direction. But it tells us that Jacob decided, I'm not going to let Benjamin go. I'll let all you guys go, but Benjamin is not going. Again, Benjamin is somewhere about 20-some years old here. What did I say? About 23 years old. And Benjamin has been taken care of quite a bit because he doesn't want to lose Benjamin. That's his other favorite. That's his favorite since his other favorite died. And so he's not going to let him out of his sight. And so he's going, let some calamity befall him. And by him, he means me. Because if something happens to him, it's going to kill me. And so he's going to protect his son, and he's not going to allow his son to go, which kind of plays a big part in this whole story. And so in verse 6 to verse 20, it says, now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people in the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their face to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, Where did you come from? Where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan, to buy food. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them, and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." But he said to them, "No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. In fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Moses, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Then Joseph said to them the third day, "Do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine to your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will verify, and you shall not die." And they did so. Regardless of how the brothers may have felt, whether there was a tinge of shame going down there, they knew that the time of famine, they knew that this time of famine here was they were at this guy's bidding. They knew because of that they would have to depend on this Egyptian official for whatever came their way. And they would have to pay him great respect by bowing down. Now, normally you would do that anyways because you're going to show respect if you're going to a high official, but they're realizing, man, this is not normal times, and so we will bow down as much as we have to. We need some food. Hunger is a crazy thing. We will do whatever it takes so that we can buy, because we've brought them some money, but we need your favor to be able to go. Now understand, there's a lot of people coming before Pharaoh or before Joseph at this time. And it was Joseph who was in charge of all of it. Now it's interesting because it's not just where they're at, it's in other locations that he is overseeing all of that. It just so happened, coincidentally, that he was where these guys showed up. And so now they coincide together. And these guys, they actually are bowing down to their brother. And in these next verses, as we just read, it reminds us, or Joseph is reminded of the dream that he had about 20 years earlier. 22 years earlier. That his brothers would bow down to him back in Genesis 37. And lo and behold, look at who's on their face right now. Imagine that. You bowing down to me. I heard that somewhere. But can you imagine when he is sharing those things, he could not have imagined where he would be at 22 years later. Here's an interesting thought as I was looking at this. When Joseph's brothers plotted to murder him, and then decided, well, instead of killing him, let's just sell him as a slave instead. They had done this for the reason of trying to get rid of him because he's this dreamer. They're trying to tell him your dreams are stupid. The things that you think of are dumb. And they call him this dreamer, and they want to get rid of him and smash his dreams to smithereens. Back in chapter 37, they're saying, here comes this dreamer. Let's do this. Let's get rid of him, because they knew if we get rid of him, then his dreams, they're gone with him. The irony is here that by them sending Joseph to Egypt, it provided a way for them to eventually come and totally fulfill those dreams. What an irony. That would happen. And Joseph saw their brother. Can you imagine Joseph seeing his brothers? Watching these guys as the line is just filing through and going, those guys look like Hebrews. They look like my brothers. Oh my God, they are my brothers. Can you imagine? It's been 22 years. He recognizes them, but they don't really recognize him. Imagine this, when you're 17 years old and then you become 39 years old, you change quite a bit. Now, from 30-something to 50-something, maybe not as much. Maybe gain a few pounds, get a little grayer. Not a lot. But from 17 to 30-something, we changed quite a bit in that time. I know a couple of you younger people going, not me. It's like, it'll happen. It happens to all of us. Happens to the best of us. They never even thought that they would probably see their brother again ever. Now, again, they sold him into slavery, but they would not be standing before him in any way, shape, or form. But he recognizes them. They don't recognize him in a lot of ways, mainly not just because he's grown older, but now he is clean shaven. He looks like an Egyptian. He dresses like an Egyptian. He talks like an Egyptian. He walks like an Egyptian. He dances. He dances like an Egyptian. He is speaking the language, so they have no clue who he is. I mean, again, he probably has that eyeliner and all that stuff that you see the pictures of these people. So there is no way that they would ever have recognized this young man. And yet, when he sees that it is his brothers, it says that he acted as a stranger to them. Now, if that were me, I would have been saying, hey, who's bowing down now? You know? I would have just like gloated all over them. But I'm not as holy as he is. And that's why I'm not in the Bible and he is. Because I would have just rubbed it in their face as they're on the ground, rubbing their face in the ground. But he doesn't do this. Again, he's learned a lot. God has ministered to him in a lot of ways, and so he doesn't reveal himself to them, and he speaks roughly to them. And you're going, wait a minute here, is he going to start acting like a jerk? And I don't think that he's acting like a jerk. I truly believe at this moment, at this time, that God is the one that's working in him and through him. Again, if he was fleshly like me, he would have just revealed himself and just kind of went after them. But he doesn't do that because there's things that God is wanting to do in this whole situation. And the wisdom of God, because we learned last week that Pharaoh knew the Spirit of God is in this man. And the Spirit of God was working in him to give him the wisdom, to get as much information from these guys before he really reveals himself, before their relationship is actually restored. But God is working in Jacob and Joseph's heart right now that he already loves his brothers. Oh, he's speaking rough to them. He's going to make them jump through these hoops, but his heart is burning right now. You can imagine that. He wants to reveal himself, but it's not the right time. And so he has to use wisdom in this, and he puts them on the spot. As again, there's a line coming through, and everybody's like, here's your grain, here's the money, here's the grain, go. And he stops these guys. Hey, where are you guys from? Who are you guys? Where are you guys from? Oh, we're just poor little beggars coming for some food, And he puts them on the spot. And again, I don't think that he's being a jerk here. And he singles them out. And I thought of, the immigrations, when you're going through the airports and all of a sudden it's like, you, come here. It's like, oh, what did we do? I'm sure these guys are thinking it's like the 20 guys before us, man. They just walked through, and how come, what did somebody look at this guy wrong? What's going on? But they get singled out, and now they're taken into secondary, if you will. They're taking them over on this part over here, and so they're being singled out, and he says to them, where have you come from? And when he tells them, again, he recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. And all this is now playing in his heart and in his mind and stuff. And with the wisdom of God, he says, you guys are spies. That's what you guys are doing. And he's accusing them of something that is very, very dangerous to be a spy. Again, he's going to start interrogating them. And this could mean death for them, to be accused of being spies. It's interesting because not only have they bowed down to him, but now they're pleading with him basically for their lives. And the one that they called the dreamer at one point, now they're calling my Lord. and later on, we're going to see in the next few chapters, they keep on referring to him as the man. The man over there, the man. And I'm thinking, yes, he is the man. Yes, he is. Again, they let him know certain things about them, that they were the sons of one man, which is true. But they also referred to themselves as honest men, which is not true. Now, they might be thinking, no, it's been a long time, blah, blah, all this stuff. We are honest men. We're here because we really need the food and this and that. But the guy up there, Joseph, knows exactly who they are. And when they say that they're honest men, he doesn't buy it, not one bit. But he needs to see if something has changed in their life. And again, instead of calling them out right there and then, because he was said, honest, really, where's that? Didn't you have another brother? I would have started playing it up. Handsome bro, coat of many colors. Anything ring a bell here? But he kind of is drawing them in. And instead of calling them out, he's accusing them to where they're giving up more information. And in verse 13 is a very important verse. Because they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. And he heard exactly what he needed to hear, that their younger brother is still alive. Because he has no clue that when they left them or when they sold them, that they didn't go back and then end up killing his little brother. He had no clue. And he also finds out that his dad is still alive. So that's where he was goading them to find out a little bit more about what's going on over there. And for them to say, and one is no more, I bet you he's thinking, oh, you guys went home and told dad that I got killed and blah, blah, blah. So he's getting all this information from them. Again, he could have said, oh, that guy that's killed, guess what, Brostein? I'm not dead. I'm right here. And I would just start talking in their language, right? Now, they might be thinking there's no way that he could have made it through this whole time for these 22 years and still been alive. He probably couldn't handle it because it was Joseph. But maybe they believe, oh, he's dead, and they believe their own lie. But Joseph said to them in verse 14, as I have spoken, it is as I have spoke to you. You are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. And so again, he's testing them because he needs to see where these guys are at. Have they changed? Has something changed in their lives? And when he says, by the life of Pharaoh, he's saying, on the death of my king, I will do these things. Or if these things don't happen, I'm swearing on him. And then he tells them what he wants. And he gives them a plan about sending someone back to go get his their little brother. And you would think that at that moment, they would start thinking, why does he want to see our little brother? Why is he so interested in this little guy? And so he goes on, he tells them the plan. He puts them in prison for 3 days. And part of me wants to go, a little payback here? I don't know, maybe. But he kept them in there for 3 days. And then Joseph changes the plans at the end here. And he says, no, instead of sending one of you guys back, one of you guys stays here. And the rest go. And so they agreed to all of that. Verse 21. Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother. For we saw the anguish in his soul when he pleaded with us, and we did not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money in his sack, and to give them provision for the journey. Thus he did for them. So they loaded the donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money. There it was at the mouth of the sack. So he said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us? So can you imagine, as soon as this trouble starts, and they are now all by themselves, not knowing that this guy can understand what they're saying, the first thing they go back to, the very first thing, 20-some years later, to what they did to their brother. Why? Because guilt can kill you. It will linger in your life. See, these guys, they might have suppressed what they did, but they could never forget what happened in their life. Because they were never, they never asked for forgiveness. They never dealt with that. They told the lie and they believed the lie so much that's the way well, the guy's dead now. We're done. But it never escaped them, because as soon as they're in trouble, what did they go back to? That incident. It's because of what we did to our brother. This is why this bad stuff is going on with us. And it's interesting because Reuben speaks up, and because if you remember the story, Reuben had gone and he came back. He's like, where's our bro? Oh, we sold him. We didn't kill him, bro. We're good. And he begins to tell him, didn't I tell you guys that we shouldn't do this stuff? It's interesting because, again, I was talking about it on Sunday morning, that the things that people deal with when they don't come to the Lord and ask for forgiveness and get right with Him, that they carry stuff and guilt in their lives, and they walk around in their lives, and there's always something that they cannot get over because of their sin, because of their past. And guilt will kill us. And we as Christians, we have the opportunity to come to Christ and be cleansed to where we can walk in the newness of life. But when we can't, or we don't, or the world, they walk around with so much pain and guilt that it's killing them. And it's weighing upon them. And they're doing stuff in their lives because they're trying to suppress things in their lives. And this is what we see here, that after 22 years after the incident, that's the first thing they go back there, because guilt, as I heard one pastor say, has the shelf life of a Twinkie. It'll last forever. And so they get to this point, and it says that they didn't know that he understood, because he's hanging around there listening to them. And it's at that moment that he begins to weep and he turns away. Can you imagine? He's hearing what they did and what their thought process was. And it's interesting because when he composes himself and he comes back to them, he takes Simeon. And it's interesting that he takes Simeon. He doesn't take Reuben. Reuben's the oldest. He doesn't take Reuben because he just found out Reuben had nothing to do with what they did to me. Because he should have taken Reuben as the oldest, but he doesn't. Simeon is next to the oldest. And he takes him and he binds him and he puts them in the front of their eyes. And then what we begin to see here is something so amazing, because he's going, okay, you guys go home. And I don't know if he changed his mind because he thought, no, I don't need to keep all of them here and one guy go back to my dad. I will keep one guy and they will take all they need to go take care of my dad and his family. Because now there's 9 of them that are going full of grain, full of everything that is necessary. And not only that, but he commands that the grain be put in there, and also their money that they paid. He put it back in there. And not only that, but he gives them above and beyond. And this is what grace looks like. Above and beyond, he provides for their journey. He gives them what they need from here to there, and perhaps he gives them the money back so that they can make their way back the next time. And so we just see the grace of God in this. And it's interesting because they're looking at this, and as they take off, they say goodbye to their brother, and they take off, and now the donkey needs some grain, so he opens it up, and lo and behold, his money's there. Now, some people would say, praise the Lord, man. We got our money back. They're all happy, but he's going, oh no. Even the good that comes upon them, they're thinking, God is doing this to us. God's trying to ruin our lives. Because now, because of this, they could be considered as thieves. Not only spies, but thieves. How'd you get the money back? It was just there. Yes, we put everybody's money back. How did that happen? How did you buy somebody out? Again, all these things are happening that these guys are going, something weird is going on here. But that's what's happened in their life. And so let's read the rest of the chapter here. As they're going, oh my gosh, what are you doing to us, Lord? Verse 29. Then they went to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man who is the Lord of the land spoke roughly to us and took us for spies in the country. But we said to him, we are honest men and not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the country, said to this, by this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of the household, of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me. So I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Then it happened, as they emptied their sacks, that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundle of money, they were afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me. And Reuben spoke to his father, saying, kill my two sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. And he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any calamity shall befall him along the way in which you go, then you will bring my gray hair down with sorrow to the grave. Man, oh man, what a family gathering. Dad, you're not going to believe this. So as he begins to tell them what's going on, you could imagine Jacob going, I can't let you guys go anywhere because you lose a brother. Now, I'm thinking he probably doesn't care a lot about Simeon like he cared about Joseph or Benjamin, but it's a son nonetheless. But I think in his mindset is, we're not going back there. Let him die. I'm not going to let Benjamin go. And I'm sure he's thinking, why did you tell this guy that you had a younger brother? Did you have to give him so much information? You can almost imagine this family argument going on. But dad, but why did you? And going back and forth, all this craziness. And then as they're starting to do all this crazy stuff, they start unloading, and it's like, oh my goodness, all our money is back. Everything is back. Again, what God is doing in this situation, he's preparing hearts to reconcile with Joseph, because now it's like not only are we accused of spies, but we can be accused of thievery. And if we don't go back, then we lose another brother for sure. But you have to let Benjamin go. He's going, I'm not letting Benjamin go. And this is what's interesting, that now Jacob is not trusting the Lord, but taking care more of his son than the Lord. He's concerned more about his son than anything else. Which again is a danger, because I know as parents, we love our family, we love our kids, but when we love them too much in that respect, it becomes sin. And that's what he's beginning to do. He's not trusting, he's not going, you know what, let's seek the Lord right now. Because of all this craziness, it sounds like the Twilight Zone is happening right now, and all this crazy stuff going on, let's just rest, let's just stop. We have the provision. Let's take care. Your brother's in prison. We'll go get him out. We'll do whatever it takes. But he's not doing that. He's kind of freaking out. He's not allowing the Lord to minister to him at this time. And he's saying, there's no way I'm going to let my son go. Because if I let him go and something happens to him, and this is where, again, as parents, we never want something to happen with our kids, ever. But we have to get to a point that they are God's, not ours. They belong to him. And he will, again, he's been preparing everything here. And now you get to a point like, I don't know if I can trust God with my kid. I don't know if that is doable right now. I want to read to you something that I got from one of the commentaries. It says, if Joseph's family wasn't messed up and weird, his brothers would never have sold him as a slave. If Joseph's brothers never sold him as a slave, then Joseph would never have gone to Egypt. If Joseph never went to Egypt, he would never have been sold to Potiphar. If Joseph had never been sold to Potiphar, Potiphar's wife would never have falsely accused him of rape. If Potiphar's wife never accused Joseph of rape, then Joseph would never have been put in prison. If Joseph had never been put in prison, he would never have met the baker and the butler of Pharaoh. If Joseph never met the baker and the butler of Pharaoh, he would have never interpreted their dreams. If Joseph never interpreted their dreams, he would never have been never would have interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. If Joseph never interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, he would never have become prime minister, second in Egypt only to Pharaoh. If Joseph never became prime minister, he never would have wisely prepared for the terrible famine to come. If Joseph never wisely prepared for the terrible famine, then his family back in Canaan would have died in the famine. If Joseph's family back in Canaan died of a famine, then the Messiah could not have come from a dead family. If the Messiah did not come forth, then Jesus never came. If Jesus never came, then we are all dead in our sins and without hope in this world. We are grateful for God's great and wise plans. Isn't that fascinating? That when we read stories like this, things that have happened in these situations that we see good, bad, and ugly throughout, and all we want was the good. It's like, but we can't just always have good, people. There has to be bad. There has to be ugly. We have to go through trials. We have to go through heartaches. We have to, because that is what builds us. That is what tests us. Because a faith that is not tested is a faith that cannot be trusted. That's why, as hard as it is for us, and many of us are in those places, we either believe that God is working all things out for our good or we don't. Because if we do, then whatever comes our way, and there's tragedies galore, and every last one of us will suffer that, then we can go through this list once again. It's like if. Because if these things wouldn't have happened in Joseph's life, and again, he was a young man, and he had to go through all of that. But it was because of that we today have the hope of eternal life because of who Jesus Christ is, because Judah would be in that line. And so we look back at things like this, and we look at a man like Jacob, who wrestled with God, and God had the victory, but even now he is still wrestling with God because he's not allowing his son to be taken so he can go save the life of his other son. He'd rather see that son die than give up this son. And so there's a lot that we learn from these stories here, man. It's not just great little Bible stories. There are things that will build us up and encourage us as we have to go through many things. And if we don't go through those things, then God is not glorified in your life with the praise reports of how he saw you through these things. Amen. Jesus, we thank you once again for your faithfulness, Lord. We don't always know your plan, Lord God, but we know that you are always at work. We know that you do have a plan, Lord. And even as Jeremiah had said that you told Jeremiah that you knew the plans for us, and yet they were headed over to Babylon for 70 years, Lord. And you had that plan in store for them. And so, Lord, even when we don't quite comprehend, Lord, let us lean back and trust who you are, that you are working all things out in our lives, Lord. And so, Father, please, Lord, I pray that the things that we're going through today, that we might put those things in perspective and say, Lord, you have to have a plan here, because I know that you are for me and not against me. And just like you were with Joseph, Lord, through all the trials, through everything he had to go through, even through this situation where he really couldn't even express himself and expose himself yet, you used it to restore this relationship that he would have with them eventually. And so, Lord, thank you. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.